The story of Xenoblade Chronicle 3 is a first for the series. It provides me with an invested interest in finishing the story because it incorporates a relatively familiar concept that might just be what these 60-hour JRPGs need: mystery. Ever since the first reveal trailer, it has been clear that Xenoblade 3 somehow ties into the first two games, and this gives me a compelling reason to finish the campaign, to see how it ties into the larger franchise. Most JRPGs are self-contained stories, which is a good thing, because if I had to play the first 15 Final Fantasies in order to understand the plot behind the latest one, that franchise would be more dead than Square Enix when the NFT market crashes. Make no mistake, you certainly don't have to play the first two Xenoblade games to understand or even get the most out of Xenoblade 3, but having completed these first two games helps significantly in getting invested in the journey of Noah's motley crew. Oftentimes, it's hard to get invested in stories this girthy, as no doubt your enthusiasm will begin to waver around the 35-hour mark, when your only motivation is to stop the evil overlord from conquering the land. I've played Xenoblade Chronicles 2 3 times, but I've only ever completed it once, as I began to stop caring once my replays began dragging into their second consecutive week. That's what's so clever about Xenoblade 3. It's not only asking you to care on behalf of Noah and Mio, instead, it also wants you, the player, to directly care because everything somehow ties into the other games and characters that you may or may not like. It's not something many JRPGs do. Sure, most of them have some kind of twist that generally involves there being a true enemy above the one you just defeated, but hardly ever lay down a mystery plot thread with no answer at the start and 60 hours to answer them. Of course, this doesn't work if those plot threads are about characters you don't really care about at the start of the game, as you're often put off by the bad voice acting, although these generally will tend to grow on you as you spend more and more time with these characters, far more than you would with most other game characters. So Xenoblade 3 makes sure that its plot threads somehow relate to pre-established characters, which gets you in the door, so it makes it easier for the new cast to grow on you as you try to get to the center of the mystery. That's something Xenoblade 2 in particular definitely lacked, as a Catgirl, Pervy Furby, and McBritty the Brit aren't the most compelling character lineup for the first 20 hours of a game, where your motivation is just to get to a garden. Speaking of character lineups, let's talk about our party this time around. Noah is a character that seems to be based on the samurai. From his ponytail and choice of weapon, he's very soft-spoken unless his friends are hurt. He seeks to end the war of Kevnus and Agnes, and he respects the fallen warriors no matter what side of the battle they were on. I never felt as connected with him as I did with Shulk, but I never wanted to kick him in the balls like I did with Rex. Mio, who continues the tradition of having cat characters with a punny name, is a character that tries to be brave for the sake of her friends, but secretly fears the clock ticking down on her neck. But other than that, I don't find her to be that interesting of a character. The foul-mouthed Uni certainly has the most personality of the main cast. Her deadpan snarkiness actually made her my second favourite character, and while I've never understood why everyone in this universe is British, it's always the thick Cockney accents that make me chuckle the most in this franchise. And I do love her character development throughout the plot, but that's too spoilery for here. Taion is a character that's sadly way too tropey for me, the insufferable genius. While he doesn't often boast about his brilliance, whenever someone compliments him, he has to say that he's always skilled. He could take a lesson in modesty, and giving the tactician glasses is just a step too far. Lanz is far and away the best party member. A far cry from the Xenoblade tradition of having the muscle guy be the nice one like Ryan and Zeke. Lanz is kind of a dick, and I sort of love him for it, especially when he's calling Taion out. But more importantly, he's friendly to the people that deserve it, like Noah, Mio, and Senna. Hence, he definitely has a soft side, but he buried it within himself. Despite her boisterous personality, Senna is a person with a massive codependency on Mio, and it speaks to the fact that she's insecure about herself, hence she latches onto someone she idolizes. She's one of the more complex characters, although she's malnourished in terms of screen time. Overall, the party is a unique blend of archetypes, some good, some bad, and some boring, but the dynamic mostly makes for an entertaining cast to journey across the continent with. The Flame Clock mechanic is a fantastic way that Xenoblade 3 incorporates gameplay into its storytelling. It makes the player hungry to snuff out the life in their enemies as they gain selfish rewards for doing so. This system is how the game puts its players in the shoes of its characters, always hungry for the next kill just to survive, just for the game to tell its proper story about breaking free of cycles and escaping the endless now. Xenoblade Chronicles 3's story is filled with a vast amount of metaphors, abstract concepts, and symbolisms. The most apparent of these symbolisms are Ouroboros and a Mobius strip, which are two symbols meant to represent infinity, or something that never ends. The symbols have an obvious meaning to someone who's finished the campaign, but I believe there is also a subtle reference to how no one in this game is capable of shutting up. Veterans of the franchise will know this as nothing new, as during battle, dialogue is spouted at such an intense rate that the overlapping makes the end result an incomprehensible drivel, which essentially cancels the issue out. However, it's the end of battle quotes that will make you want to drive your head into a wall multiple times. Conservatively, you will get into well over 1,000 battles during your time with Xenoblade, and at the end of each one, you'll hear something along the lines of, "I'm the girl with the gall, and I was the MVP. You hear that, Noah? Lance wants something a bit meatier." The sheer frequency of these lines makes them such a parasite to the sound design. Of course, you have your "we showed them a thing or three" and such from other games, but these dialogue lines play every goddamn time you defeat someone, and they will drive you entirely up the wall. While Xenoblade stories are often long-winded, or in this case long gale-forced, Xenoblade 3 has some pretty lousy pacing issues in terms of cutscene length. The end of Chapter 5 in particular goes on for 45 uninterrupted minutes of cutscene. You could watch 2 episodes of anime in the time it takes to watch that scene, and there's just no excuse for pacing this slow. Also, by the end, Xenoblade 3 is taking steps dangerously towards Kingdom Hearts territory, in that suddenly everything stops making sense, but you'll see what I mean when you get there. With such a long story, a vital factor of these story-driven games is voice acting. Persona and Fire Emblem still remain the only JRPG franchises to go out and hire established voice actors, while Square Enix and Nintendo continue to cut costs by hiring first-time voice actors in lead roles. I understand that it's incredibly expensive to hire a voice actor for such massive scripts, but do you really have to cut costs with such a critical part of your game? Especially when a criticism I have of nearly every JRPG is that they could stand to be a bit shorter. This results in less development time, so you get a faster turnaround rate. People don't have to sacrifice entire weeks to play one game, and if the trade-off is lead characters that sound believable and emotional, then sign me up. Just to clarify, I have nothing against first-time voice actors, we all have to start somewhere, but that starting point shouldn't be the main character of a AAA game with more dialogue than a PlayStation exclusive. Although I will admit that Chat Upon Riku is just perfect. The story of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is a wonderful middle ground between the first 2 games. Its cast is infinitely more colourful and lovable than Xenoblade 2. At the same time, its darker story and more mature themes put it on par with Xenoblade 1. However, it gets a bit too nonsensical at the end. Unfortunately, a chronicle is an understatement for just how long Xenoblade 3 is, and like its predecessors, it suffers for it. However, this course correct from the ever-polarizing Xenoblade 2 indicates that the future burns bright for Xenoblade.